Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We had a full weekend of football. The college football championship is tonight. I'll probably watch a little bit of it, but it doesn't really.
I will not watch any of it.
Yeah, it doesn't really grab me. ESPN is broadcasting on like every network they own, having like the LSU broadcast in Mandarin. It's ridiculous how many different things they're doing. We have a few things to touch on in the pre-show. I just wanted to start out with this. It's a little old news now since it happened on Friday after the show, but Neil Peart, the drummer of Rush, passed away of brain cancer at the age of 67. And it was funny because at the Sabres game on Saturday afternoon, the Sabres came out to Tom Sawyer. Rush was very big in Buffalo, very big, obviously, in Toronto, where they were from. You could argue whether they're a progressive band. Russ, I believe they were, because their main.
No, they were.
Their main influences were Genesis and Yes, but always loved them. Saw them live a bunch of times, and this is the reality that we're going to face over the next, say, 10 to 15 years. All of our heroes are going to be passing away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Rush, but I liked a few songs. But I like the musicians; they were great musicians. Like if I did a Mount Rushmore of drummers, it'd be Buddy Rich, Carl Palmer, and Neil Peart. And then Bruford would probably be the next one. It's because I noticed Peart, like probably 15 years ago, was playing like a bigger drum set than anybody I'd ever seen other than Carl Palmer. So that's when I sort of clued in, like, wow, he's even better than I thought he was, because I had never seen him live or anything.
Yeah, when a rock star passes away, it really does remind me. To me, it's very similar to when an athlete passes away. Like It's not the same when a movie star dies, but some rock and roll and sports, because of the energy and when how you feel when you go to the events. I think there's some similarity there. Like I think you get the same sort of buzz or high of going to a concert as you get to going to a real good sporting event. So that's how I always feel when someone passes away, the same way I do when an athlete from my childhood passes away.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to see them as a young person, like in my high school days, when they played at the Odd in Buffalo, and I saw them on their last tour. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. They were still great live. They hadn't dropped off like a lot of other older bands and older performers have. So I'm just thankful that I saw them live so many times. I'm switching to football here. Russ, I took inordinate amount of pleasure at seeing the Baltimore Ravens losing, not because I had anything against the Ravens, but a sports radio personality in Baltimore in their off week decided to slam Buffalo as a city of losers and was just basically trashing Buffalo. And only for that reason, I'm like, okay, buddy, I hope your team loses. And the gods shined on the Tennessee Titans, so I was very happy.
Yeah, I mean, I like Lamar Jackson. I wasn't rooting for the same kind of thing you were, but I'm now rooting against the referees. I saw some stuff that was just ridiculous. Ridiculous. So in the Green Bay game, as an example, the second touchdown Green Bay scored, they call it immediately a touchdown, but there's no way they could have seen that it was a touchdown. With the way the pile was, with the way the ball was, it is impossible. They immediately call touchdown, right? And what you realize after 3 replays is that you see the guy's helmet, and the helmet is over the line. His body's nowhere over the line, which means the ball can't be over the line because he was head first. And, of course, in the replay, they can't overturn it because they're like, well, there's nothing definitive. And it's like, so that's the biggest bugaboo now with football, Kevin, and they're calling these definitive things too quickly. And then in replay, you can't do anything about it now.
Well, it's hard for me to get worked up over officiating. I do some things. When you had the grievous pass interference call last year, like that was just so far over the line, and you do want to prevent that. But there's no perfect system. Like I always say to you, like, give me a better system. Like they've tried forever to try to make it work and try to be better, and no matter what they seem to do, it's never good enough. And they really have. I mean, look in the last 15 years, we've tried everything, trying to be better, not only in football, but in hockey as well. And it's still not imperfect. And I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. And I don't even think it's ever going to be close. No. Like, I think it's just a frustration that's sort of built in to all sports watching. And, you know, we had to accept it when we were kids before replay. And even with replay, we've now discovered we still have to accept that these kind of things are going to happen. And
actually, Kevin's hit on something here because, like, and we'll talk about the NHL thing when we get into the regular show, but, like, Jadeveon Clowney put on a headshot that wasn't even penalized. So all the sports, for all the talk about the headshots, for all the rules about the headshots, we're still finding that at different times it doesn't matter.
Well, for those who criticize the NHL for having different standards when it comes to penalties in the playoffs as opposed to the regular season, like I said, last week, Josh Allen got hit after he had thrown the ball 3 times. There was no call whatsoever, so there's a different standard. And in the NFL,
Lamar Jackson was on the ground. He got hit in the head.
Yeah, and there were 2 calls this week. One was at the end of the game, so it attracted a lot of attention. The Jimmy Graham catch on 3rd and 9 where he slid past the line. It's like, you know, if you use the replay, like if you see where he's caught the ball and where he's down, okay, but the problem is there's continuous motion and he can't stop himself like right when he hits the ground. So it's tough. And the other one was Deshaun Watson early in that game against Kansas City. He went for the corner of the end zone. The ball was not in bounds, but his body was in bounds. And then as he crossed the goal line, he loses possession and he fumbles it out of the end zone. They called it touchdown, and they didn't have established evidence video-wise to overturn it. That shouldn't have been a touchdown. But
yeah, but that's, you know, like I said, I just don't know there's any way you're ever going to get those out of the game.
No.
You know, I mean, if you could, we would have done it a long time ago.
Sure.
Because I don't think the NFL loves being embarrassed like this every week. There's just no other options. I mean, we've tried. You can't replay every. You know, I guess ideally you could replay every play and have a jury of 12 doing an instant thing, and I bet we'd still find we're unhappy with what they have to say about it, because we see it now. Like I find it absolutely amazing, and it's more so in the NFL, but occasionally in the NHL, you'll be watching a game with 5 people, and you'll all watch the replay 2 or 3 times, and you'll never be unanimous on what you just saw. Right. It never, you never agree.
Well, there's the one elephant in the room with this, and we never know the answer is. We never know exactly what they're looking at in Toronto or New York when we're talking about these leagues too, because even on air, they always say, well, just so you know, they're not seeing this view. Then why are we seeing it?
Yeah. And then they show the view. They show the view that they get 5 minutes after the fact. You know, right. It's not in question what the decision was. They show it then. Why can't they show it to us instantaneously?
All right, just show me what they're seeing. Don't show me anything else.
Well, the other problem is too, when we were a kid, when these kind of things would happen, our coaches who hated whining about officiating back then, now it's not only acceptable, it's expected.
Yeah.
But back then they'd always say, don't get in a position where one officiating call is going to cost the game. Well, the problem with that kind of logic now is there's so much parity. Like, we talk about parity in the NHL, and it is a different level of parity. But the NFL has some parity too. There's some really good teams, and we've seen this. Obviously, the Ravens are a terrific team, and crash goes their chariot, and they're gone. And we saw a scare there as well.
Kansas City.
Yeah, where it looked problematic, and and we want them to get it right. I just don't think. I just think for us to whine and complain about it, it's not going to change. There's always, because if you have any measure of human element, which you have to have, you're going to always have plays like this. It's just the way it is.
Well, just consider this. It gives us something to talk about on the shows.
Well, it's almost built for talk radio and for podcasts.
Yeah.
Because people people have always been upset about officiating. When I was a kid, there's probably just as many people who were upset about it. But now we know about it because we got social media and everything else. And we just
the good news for you, Kev, is knowing that you're a Lions fan, you should at least be happy to know that there's a dumber organization than the Lions, and that's the Cleveland Browns. So
well, I hope I read this now. did I read it wrong, or have they said that when they did the hiring of the coach, they told him that he had to submit his game plan to the analytics people by Friday?
I heard that this morning.
Like, wow, like this is how far we've gone. Like that, that's amazing. But I just had this conversation with someone from the NHL today. Like, we had analytics back then. We just didn't call it that. Like when we were in Little League baseball, your coach always said, "Hey, a walk is as good as a hit."
Right.
They said that all the time.
Yeah.
And now we know because of Moneyball. Well, that's really true. If you get on base and everything else, and there's more power to it. But now it's even reached in the recreational sports playing. And I'll give you an example of that. As some of you know who follow me on social media, I bowl once a year, and that is at the Allen Bowling Extravaganza, which is my family and friends. We have somewhere between 25 and 30 people. We go out, we bowl a couple games, have a good time. At the alley we bowled at this year, they keep track of the spin rate of your ball and how hard that you throw it.
Wow.
So when you're done, not only do you get a score, but you see that you threw the ball at 17 miles an hour or 18 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour, and how many revolutions it had on the way to the pins. Now, that frankly, that's just remarkable. And I don't know, maybe too much information, but like the analytics has now crept in to the the amateur use, and I find myself now that when I'm golfing, because I've watched so much golf, I say, like my swing rate, isn't good enough. That's why I'm not driving, and I start to think, what can I do? And instead of saying, I'm going to swing harder, I start thinking, well, where can I get a club that will compensate for my lack of speed on my swing? So,
well, Kev, I bowl every 2 weeks in a league. I've done that for a couple decades, and the way I bowled last week, it was like I bowled once a year.
Yeah. So anyway, let's talk some hockey. We've probably bored everyone to tears.
Yeah. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, January 13th, 2020.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen, just Kevin Allen.
Just Kevin Allen.
And I'm just Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with this because this sort of took me aback yesterday. And Kev, I was looking forward to discussing this with you. The firing of Ray Shero as the GM of the New Jersey Devils. I believe he's been there for 5 seasons. So he's been there for a while, but very successful general manager, very good reputation throughout the league. He fired John Hines earlier this year. The team has won the draft lottery twice, taking Heishier and taking Jack Hughes, but this seems to be an organization that's in transition or turmoil. You have to say it because they're not having a lot of success, and I'm a little surprised that Shero got fired. But give me let us know what you would think of this situation.
Well, I was surprised. I really was. I mean, you just explained it. This is a guy with a top-notch reputation around the league, one of the most well-liked general managers in the league. I think he could be a candidate even still today for other jobs. I think he has that much respect around the league. Now, saying all that, in today's world, having a good reputation and being well liked is not going to save you from being fired, and it didn't. And this is a production-oriented league. And I think there were complications here. And this is not based on any reporting. This is based on observation. Mm-hmm. But I would suggest to you that Ray Shero protected John Hines a little longer than ownership wanted him to. And I think at that point, it created maybe some doubt in ownership's mind about whether they had the right guy. And I think as they began to look at this and started to analyze what he had done, the PK Subban hiring, now he wants out, and did what I think ownership, probably was expecting I don't know if they expected him to win the cup this year, but I'm sure sure that they expected them to be much better than they were this season. And I'm guessing they had a meeting of the minds, and in that meeting, it was realized that they weren't on the same page, and that the way Ray Shero saw this franchise going and ownership probably wasn't the same. And I base that on the phrasing of, they came to a mutual agreement. I don't know that maybe they weren't going to fire him going in, but I think once they got in that meeting, I think everybody realized, this relationship isn't working and may not work, and they moved on. So it may take Ray some time to get back, because general managers, as we all know, they hang on to their jobs a little bit longer than coaches, so they don't turn over as much. But we'll see Ray in the league for sure. He's too good a guy. It's not like, I say this all the time when coaches get fired, but the same is true of GMs. He didn't wake up on a Monday and forget how to be a good general manager. Circumstances. Now, it was the writing on the wall was in his handwriting. I mean, he made these decisions, but some of them, were things out of his control. Like he couldn't, he wanted to re-sign Taylor Hall, but couldn't. He was unwilling to re-sign. But the Subban one, he'll have to take responsibility for.
Well, I looked at it differently. Like, I knew he would get fired at some point if the results were bad. I didn't know it would be that Sunday, but I knew he was on shaky ground, not because he deserved it, but because Josh Harris has unrealistic expectations. So I think Harris went into that summer basically telling Shero, we got to make the playoffs. So Shero did what he could as a really good GM, and he pulled off a good trade. I think PK Subban didn't come in this kind of shape that PK Subban needs to be in this point in his career, and he's not having the same results. So I think next year you'll probably see a better PK Subban, but that doesn't save Ray Shero right now. The other thing is, I knew Shero would be around long enough to trade Taylor Hall, because I knew Harris wanted him to trade him if that was going to happen, and he was going to – that's how Harris is. He was going to keep him around to trade him. And I think after the return, I think they probably – the club didn't like the return. Harris didn't like the return that he got, and I think that probably soured things too. But again, that's not all on Shero, because there was a very narrow window, very narrow margin. You knew he wasn't coming back. Like, everything sort of denigrated after they knew they couldn't sign him. So I wasn't blaming Shero either. The other situation is, this is what happens sometimes when you have an owner that owns two teams, and one of them's really good and one of them's not where he wants it to be. And now he's making quicker decisions. Because even after this decision, poor Tom Fitzgerald, he's teaming up with Marty Brodeur, who's got limited front office experience. He was actually working on the business side, not even on the hockey side this year. And now he is expecting results. Like Josh Harris said, well, I'm expecting results out of this. And it's like, they have the number one defenseman on the free agent on the trade market in Sami Vatanen, and they've got to at least trade Andy Green. And you've got somebody who's brand new at it. I mean, Shero could call anybody and get them to listen. Now you've got Brodeur and Fitzgerald doing it. Who's guaranteeing a great return now? I mean, that's what the soup is, I would say.
Well, let's say this. Shero operated last summer like his job was on the line based on the moves that they made. They went out and they got Gusev. They went out and they signed Wayne Simmons to a one-year deal. He traded, and he didn't have to trade a lot to get Subban, because Nashville was looking to dump his $9 million contract. I mean, Kev, did I mishear you? Did you say Subban I haven't heard him requesting a trade, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's looking to get out of New Jersey, because it's a situation where they're basically in a rebuild now. So he's in his early 30s. I think he probably would want to go someplace where it's a contender, but that puts the Devils in a pickle, because who's going to be able to accept a $9 million salary on a guy who right now looks like he's in decline?
Yeah, and I think that I don't know whether he officially asked for one, but the rumor around the league is that he wants out just because he doesn't see this as there's no plan, right. And there's nothing in place that assures this team is going to get better kind of next season. So we'll have to see what happens. He would be difficult to trade anyway.
Yeah.
Especially in season. If you're going to trade Subban, you'd have to trade him in the off season.
Right. And the talk is right now that Elliot Friedman was just mentioning that not only do they have rentals like Vatanen, like Andy Green, but that players like Miles Wood, that they've been sort of putting his name out there. Blake Coleman is somebody who's attracted attention. If you're trading those guys with term left on their contracts, then it's a full rebuild. Then you're going out there and you're basically saying we have to completely remake this team and build around the Hugheses and Heishier.
Right now they have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They've got guys like Ty Smith coming, but it's not enough to make a team. And so now they do have to sort of make this decision, and I don't think they're going to be able to even move Subban in the offseason. I think they're going to – and again, you still need some guys to play defense. Like, there's just not enough to even be an NHL defense. So
they'd have to retain salary, Russ. But I think honestly, if he's saying to them, I want out.
But I got a young goalie that I have to have some players in front of, or I am not giving him a chance to develop in this league if there's no defense in front of him.
Well, maybe I'm over
a franchise goalie.
Maybe I'm overestimating the importance of this, but it was really curious that the same day they fired Shiro, they called up Corey Schneider from the AHL.
I think they're just shopping him. I think Snyder had a good little moment in the A, and they said, okay, we're going to call you up. If you perform well here, maybe they could get something for Corey Schneider. I think that's the hope.
If the Devils want just a glimpse of what happens if they trade Green and Vatanen, all they got to do is look at the Detroit Red Wings.
Right.
That has absolutely no proven defenseman.
Yeah.
They're an absolute defensive mess. They're giving up 4 or 5 goals, pretty frequently. They give up so many scoring chances.
Yeah, I saw on Reddit this morning that the Detroit Red Wings at this point, and this is 43, 44 games into the regular season, have given up as many goals as the 98-99 Buffalo Sabres have the entire season. That was the year that Hasek got them to the Cup final. Okay, the other big story, and I was watching this game and saw the replay of the first Matthew Tkachuk hit on Zach Kassian, but Matthew Tkachuk, I think, was purposeful in going after Zach Kassian, who he knows is a loose cannon, has been a loose cannon in junior, has been a loose cannon in the NHL with a number of different teams, and he got Kassian to go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because he grabbed him and basically tried to get him to fight and then wailed on him. He got a 4-minute double minor, and now he's facing possible suspension. And Tkachuk after the game said, "You want to avoid getting hit? Stay off the train tracks." I love this kind of hockey. I loved guys like Darcy Tucker. I love the Tkachuk brothers. They stir it up. It's what's needed in this game. And people who are complaining that he was targeting Kassian.
Well, he did. I mean,
Cassian's been targeting players his entire career.
No. But when a guy's doing a wraparound, you are completely susceptible. And he hit him right in the head while he did a wraparound, and that was an awful hit, Mike. I
didn't see that. I saw the other.
The other is the byproduct of the no call from the wraparound, and that's what Scotty Upshaw was talking about on Twitter. Yeah. That's what made me look. And yeah, there was a wraparound, and Tkachuk hit him right in the head. Yeah. And so, of course, when nothing's called, then this is the same story that we always hear, that if the refs don't make the calls on the ice, the players will attempt to police the game. Yeah. And that's what we got.
Well, and I'm definitely in the minority, Kev, because I know that, like Russ said, Upshaw came out on Twitter and said that Tkachuk was out of line. Teemu Selanne basically called out George Peros and said, this guy is facing suspension when the other guy who hit Kassian 3 times is not. It's like, so it's raising the temperature on a number of fronts.
Well, to me, it was 1970s, 1980s hockey. It's, when you see that, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that used to go on where, you target a guy that you knew you could get off his game and, and get him riled up. And then, because that has, as we all know, it's contagious. It causes issues with your team when you do that as well. So, it made me laugh, to be honest with you. It really did.
I love Matthew Tkachuk as a player. I do.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. Yeah. But, the Tkachuks, I mean, geez, it's just funny to me that, Keith could have 2 sons who play the game so similarly to the way he played. It's really remarkable when you think about it.
Just think about it in their house. If there was one pancake and the 3 of them, what would happen? I'd be afraid.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Well, we know Keith would get it. No, all right, but okay. So like I said, I have no problem with this. If he was targeting the head, then he should have faced.
So you don't think there should be a suspension? You think he's just going to get a fine today?
No, I think Cassian's going to get suspended. Everybody is pointing to a suspension from a couple years ago involving Darnell Nurse targeting Roman Polak, and he got 2 games, and they're using that as a comparative, saying that Cassian's probably going to get 2 or 3 games. And again,
but Kachuk should get something too.
Yeah, but he's not facing any kind of discipline,
which is crazy. Like, that's the crazy part. That's again where we look at this and say, if they are truly trying to do away with headshots, they need to do better.
Yeah. Kev, we're now about 6 weeks away from the trade deadline, and it's starting to percolate now. I mean, I think we know there are teams that are definitely going to be sellers. Ottawa, they have Pajot, they have a couple other players, Craig Anderson for anybody who needs a goaltender. The Red Wings, we know if Mike Green and Trevor Daley are healthy, they'll probably be shopped as rentals. The question is whether these teams will move anybody else that have term left in their contracts, but I'm concentrating on the rentals. I mean, what are you hearing? I mean, because it just sounds to me like those guys are going to be not easy to move because of their salaries, but they'll be the ones that there'll be the most talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the rentals will draw attention. In Detroit, I know I've heard about Darren Helm possibly. I've heard a little bit of a scuttlebutt that their teams have some modest interest in contenders.
Right.
He's a guy who can score, he can skate, and if he was on a really good team, he's actually got a pretty good plus minus for a team that just gives up so many goals as well. So he's had a decent season, and on the right team, he's a 15 goal scorer. So I could see that happening, but there's no doubt that many of the contenders are looking for help. But what's interesting to me is that some of the prime contenders are all looking at the same guy. Like, Colorado is interesting in Kreider of the Rangers, and so are the Boston Bruins. Like, I think he's a perfect fit for Boston, to be honest with you. Being from Massachusetts, if you look at last year, all the Massachusetts players they had last season.
They brought in Coyle. They brought in
Charlie Coyle, and that served them well. They were happy with that experiment. So I could see that happening as well. I think Kreider would be a good fit in Edmonton as well. I think they need a scorer, but I hear reading Larry Brooks that there's the thought he is not okaying any trades to Canadian teams. So if that's the case, that's too bad. I really think it's important for Edmonton to make a move. I think it's important they get in the playoffs. I think it's important from the league perspective because I think we need to see Connor McDavid in the playoffs and Draisaitl. But I also think it's more important for the fan base there. And I think it's important for Ken Holland. He's coming in, he's trying to make send a message that it's going to be different. And I think, he needs to do whatever he needs to do. But the problem is, even if they get more scoring, which I think they need, it's their goaltending that could hold them back. I just don't have much trust in the goaltending there.
No, Koskinen's got a 5-hole and a Mack truck to drive through, and Mike Smith played a string of great games in the last couple of weeks and played okay. But I mean that's the thing. I mean the thing I'm a little hesitant about when it comes to Edmonton is Holland supposedly was in on Taylor Hall and did not like what New Jersey was asking for. They've got some good young defensemen. They got some good forward prospects. He doesn't want to give them up. He came on Toronto radio last week and said, "Well, I want to maintain our future, but I also want to go for it." Because we have McDavid and Draisaitl, and like you can't do those two things at once. If you're going to trade for rentals, you're going to have to give up something to get them.
You can, but you got to see the reason the Coyotes were able to make the trade for Taylor Hall is they wouldn't give up their top guys either.
Right.
But they had a bunch of B+ guys, and that's where Edmonton falls short. They just have A guys and B guys and C guys. And the Coyotes, gave up a bunch of guys that you go, well, okay,
Kevin World Jr.,
yeah. So and I think that was the key. I don't think the Oilers had, they didn't have enough depth to give them, multiple guys to offset the fact they wouldn't give up their top prospects because, the Coyotes didn't give up either of their top 2 guys. So,
well, Russ, going back to Kreider for a sec, just
Mhm.
I mean, I know that you've been consistent in saying that the Rangers ideally would love to get him signed, but
but in the summer, I think they'll trade him for the assets and bring him back. That's what I think, because Jeff Gordon has a relationship with him, and I really do think that's what's going to happen.
But
I think they will trade him.
but does that really work? I mean, we keep always talking about that.
No.
But
Once in a while, we see a player come back, but it's rare.
Keith Kachuk. It happened with Keith Kachuk, but
it's happened, to be sure. But I think it's always a big risk, because you end up playing with a guy, and if that team has success, then you start to bond with the guys, and it's just
I think if you trade him to the Bruins, which I do think is a possibility,
right?
I don't know if they could sign him, Kev. I don't even know if they'll have the cap space.
No.
So that's where at least it becomes a chance for them, where he's not going somewhere where they definitely can.
Whereas if you trade him to Colorado, they got enough cap space. Yeah, I mean, they could re-sign him, but then a few years down the line, when they have to sign McKinnon, then they may run into a few problems. And
plus, I do think Kreider would look at Gordon thinking he's doing a good thing for him, trading him to Boston, because that's where he's from, and he'll have a good time there. And then he can go back to the Rangers if he wants. And that's something where that might satisfy him for playing for the Bruins, because maybe as a kid he wanted to. I think that's all good. The return will be interesting, though, because the Rangers are already traded with the Bruins before and gotten good results. But now I don't think if they try and put like Zanishin or Zaboral into a package, I don't think the Rangers are going to accept that for Kreider. I think the Bruins are going to have to give him something better. Like, I think you can get the Zaboral and Zanishin for Toffoli, but I don't think you can do it for Kreider, because he's a guaranteed 25, 30-goal guy. He scores. He plays in the playoffs with speed. They're going to have to give up more than that. Now, I don't know.
Well, no, I was just going to say, you brought up Toffoli. I heard a report a couple days ago that the Bruins basically know what the price would be for Toffoli,
right?
And sort of holding that in their back pocket. That ideally they'd love to get Kreider, because Kreider would be a difference maker in their top six. But if the fallback would be Toffoli, the problem is how long is Rob Blake going to wait for a team to offer something for Toffoli? I'm sure he's got offers already on the books for Toffoli.
Right.
And at a certain point, he's going to say, I got to jump at this because he could get injured, and you don't know what's going to happen. So around this time is when Jake Muzzin was traded from LA to Toronto, and that sort of started the sale last year. And I think it's going to happen probably just before the All-Star break.
What I think is going to happen, though, is the Rangers could prey on the Bruins not only wanting to get back to the Cup, but winning it now, because they were just there. And I think they could prize someone like Anders Bork or Jack Studnicka or somebody like that. And I think that's what they
Trent Frederick.
Or Frederick. And I think that's the kind of forward they're going to have to extract in this, plus a draft pick, and, it'll be conditional and all that kind of deal.
Well, Kev, I wrote about this last week, and I believe it. The real power brokers in the next 6 weeks are not going to be the contenders and what they're willing to pay. It's going to be the teams that have cap space and what – they're going to be, if they're willing to take on salary, to use it as basically a storage facility, as you would, before the deadline. A team like Chicago, who just opened up $11 million in cap space because of Seabrook and DeHaan going on long-term injury, they could take on a short-term contract, a rental or something like that, for another team to clear cap space. We saw that a couple weeks ago. Montreal, Calgary, Buffalo all had to make deals to clear space to make just a tweaking move. And I think that teams like Ottawa, teams like Detroit,
Columbus has space, and they're going to be buying.
New Jersey, they're all going to be power brokers at this deadline.
I think you will see more of that, but I don't think it'll be on a grand scale. Like GMs have talked, like, no one minds taking a smaller salary, especially if you're not going to be a cap team, but nobody's going to take any large, I keep seeing suggestions that, you're going to be able to park a larger contract with these small. That's not going to happen. Not unless you're willing to give up something just incredible. I do believe you're right. I think there's going to be a lot of smaller, trades where you'll just take a guy that's, making $3 million or whatever, because that's what you need to clear. But I don't see any bigger guys bigger contracts moving.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I could see Columbus going after 2 or 3 players because they can do it. And if they're in it, they could be one of the bigger power brokers of this trading deadline.
I don't think.
I'm rooting for them. I really am. I really want them to be aggressive again because I just really love, they're in it to win it. And that's what sports should be about.
But then again, they exhausted enough future assets to get Duchesne, to get Dzingel last year that just having cap space might be enough. Like if there's a team out, like for example, I'll just use this as an example. This is not a rumor. I'm just saying as an example. If they need to upgrade it on defense and Zach Bogosian is out there and the Sabres are looking to move his contract to clear space for something else and Columbus needs a defenseman, then why not? It's a rental. It's not going to hurt you going forward. But they're not going to take on a Jakub Voracek who's got 3 or 4 years at $8 million, but they would take a rental on if they think it'll help their pursuit of getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree.
So now I just have to say because everybody in the chat is talking about the Leafs, so I'll just touch on this. The Leafs embarrassed themselves last night, lost 8-4 to Florida. Jonathan Huberdeau is now the leading scorer in Florida Panthers history, which is a little surprising. With 420 points as the leading point getter in the history of the Florida Panthers, it's sort of a statement on how transitional the Panthers have been throughout their history. But a lot of people are concerned about what the Leafs are doing right now. They've lost 3 games in a row, sort of an adjustment after going so great under Sheldon Keefe. So I don't think there's reason for panic out there, but there is reason, I think, to panic, Kev, because the problems that occurred under Mike Babcock are still there. It's defense. It's defense, not just the blue line, but the team's concept of playing defensively. And I know that Kyle Dubas has received a lot of criticism with the team that is high on skill, high on speed, but like low on pushback, low on toughness, and low on being able to play defensively. And they're going to come up against Boston or Tampa in the first round of the playoffs, and the big question is going to be whether that team can play against those giants and beat them. And right now, the way they play defensively, I don't see them beating them.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, and there's some pressure on Keefe, I think, to make sure that he gets them like the Nashville Predators just hired John Hines basically because he's a guy known for structure. Mm-hmm. And, they score enough goals. They score a lot of goals. They're among the leading goal scorers, but they've had no structure. They actually miss PK Subban. And I know a lot of people would go, what? Because, he's not known as a defensive player. But, they're playing now a bunch of guys at 4, 5, and 6 who are really 6s now. So I think they're one short. But more importantly, they brought in Hines to bring in some structure. And you saw that against Winnipeg. I don't know if you watched the Winnipeg game, but, the Winnipeg, which is, we all know, is a very good offensive team with a lot of dangerous players. They didn't get much opportunity to score because of the structure. I don't think you would have seen that with a Laviolette Predators team before. And I think, the point I make about Toronto is that, Babcock couldn't get these people to buy in. We all know defense is really just commitment by the players. If Keefe wants to prove that, he's a guy, he's got to get some buy-in to play a little bit different style because anybody can play defense. You just got to have the desire, to do it. And,
I saw Kyle Dubas. I don't know if it was after the 6th goal or the 7th goal, writing on a notepad, and I could imagine him writing on a notepad, "Our defense sucks."
Yeah.
What he was writing on a notepad is call up Rasmus Sandin, which they did this morning. But the problem is, and Justin Hall has had a really good year. They signed him to an extension. I think he's an NHL defenseman. He's probably a bottom pairing guy. But they're playing a pairing that played in the AHL 2 years ago. It wasn't even the top pairing on the Marlies when they won the Calder Cup, and that's the 3-4 right now with the Leafs because Jake Muzzin's hurt. I agree with Jeff Merrick, what he said on Hockey Central. Jake Muzzin is making a lot of money in free agency right now based on how badly the Leafs are playing without him in the lineup. And guys like Morgan Riley, he's been playing hurt all year. Tyson Berry is playing like Tyson Berry. He's not a very good defensive defenseman. He's a puck rusher and a power play guy. I mean, when you have forwards, Kev, that play wide open offensively and really don't play in a defensive concept, you need a defense that will cover for them, and that is not what the Leafs have right now.
No, they don't. And, you can't win in the postseason without dependable defense. Like,
No.
you can get by with a weaker offense. Even, you got to have quality goaltending, but, I've seen teams that have found some success with an average goaltender. I don't know you can win it, but you could at least have some success. But you got to have some defense in the postseason, and they're just one of the weaker defensive teams in terms of defensive effort.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are some teams, the Red Wings just don't have any personnel.
Sure,
but the Maple Leafs personnel should be better than it is defensively.
Yeah.
So which tells you that they're just not buying in. There's just no commitment to do it, and would they, go out and bring in a guy like Martinez of LA?
Well, any move that they make, they're right up against the cap right now. That's the problem. So, they would have to basically pay somebody to take Cody Cece's contract off of their hands, and maybe that would happen in a deal for a guy like Martinez, who's making $4 million. Cece's making $4.5. They'd probably have to give up something significant on top of Cece, obviously. But we know Martinez is on the block, so it's just a question of how much is going to get done at this deadline. I keep, you hear the names, you hear the speculation, but then the reality comes in is that not many teams have the cap space.
No, but that's doable. Moving CC is doable.
I think so, because I think they actually, Russ, I think they could actually move CC to a team that is looking for a rental. Not
a pure rental.
Yeah, but let's just say this. In Toronto, they're saying, oh, my God, we're going to have to pay this much and this much to get a team to take Cody Cece. I think there are teams out there in the playoff race that would take Cody Cece for a mid-round draft pick if they're looking for defensive depth. So I don't think it would be tough.
I would say this. I think some Leafs fans have a bad idea of what Cody Cece is because he's been played out of position all year.
Yeah.
He's playing higher than he should be playing in the NHL as far as pairing-wise. You put him on a better team that, he knocks him down a pairing, he's a lot better.
All right, couple quick things, just some looks at teams and just your quick thoughts on them. Kev, I've been impressed with Arizona all year, the fact that they're playing really good defensively, the fact that they continue to have success even though Ranta and Kemper have been out of the lineup. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're a solid team, and Tocchet's doing a great job. What do you think of the Coyotes right now?
Yeah, I think it's Chaika's done a tremendous job. I think he has a great understanding. He was cast as an analytics guy, but I think he has a great understanding of team chemistry as well. And hey, look, some people say, well, he's made some bad trades. Well, yeah, but you're going to make bad trades when you make a lot of trades, and he makes a lot of trades. Like he is from the David Poile, Jim Rutherford school. He keeps pulling the levers, moving things around, trying to find the right mix, and I think he's found it. And I think Tocchet has done a fantastic job there of getting that. Like that team knows its identity.
Yeah,
they've done a good job. Like we were talking about the Panthers, and I did an earlier podcast with Tom Laidlaw, and he and I got into a discussion about my problem with the Panthers right now is I don't know what their identity is, and I don't think they do either. Like, are they Joel Quenneville? Are they Barkov? I think they're just a bit of a mystery. And I understand that, you've got to win in the playoffs before you sort of know exactly kind of who you are or what you're going to be like. But they still seem like patchwork to me. Like, they seem like, I'm not really sure. It looks like they've plugged, okay, we were bad here. We got Bobrovsky. We're bad here. We got to fix. And they just seem like a patchwork quilt where I'm not really sure exactly what they are. And we probably won't know unless they get in the playoffs and make the run. Well, the Coyotes, to a certain extent, are like that because we have no history for them being in the playoffs.
Right.
But we know what the Coyotes are about. They're a good defensive team, very structured. Tocchet has made sure they're hard to play against, and they get just enough goals in order to win. So I think there's I'm a little more bullish on the Coyotes in the postseason than I am on the Panthers, even though I'm intrigued to see what the Panthers could do if they get in.
Yeah, Russ, with the Panthers, I get the feeling that we know Quenneville likes certain type of players. We've seen him be judgmental when it came to players in Chicago. They bring in somebody, he doesn't like them. He likes his guys, and I get the feeling, based on what Kevin is talking about, that there are guys on this team that he probably doesn't feel comfortable with, but he can't really move those guys out, and he's going to have to just make the best of a bad situation right now.
He'll have to coach them, Mike. That's what's going to have to happen. And he will. Like, there's just, first year like that, he's going to have to deal with that. I do think there's upside with them, and I do think there are some deals to be made, and I think they have interesting assets. Arizona's got to get Kempner back. If they don't get Kempner back, even with Ranta, they're not going to go far in the playoffs. I just don't have any faith in Antti Ranta in a 7-game playoff series. I don't. But with Kempner in there, with the defense that they have this year, they're really good. Yeah. Like, if Kempner comes back healthy, they could go right to the Western Conference Finals, and it wouldn't shock me. Yeah. That's how good I think they are. But without Kempner, they are diminished a bit. And so that's the interesting part. Bobrovsky's not done well all year. So just imagine if he did, how good Florida could be. Like, that's the scary part. I mean, they scored 8 goals, and they gave up, 4 to the Leafs, and Dreger was in there. Like, it wasn't even Bobrovsky.
Right. And something's going on with the Bobrovsky. I think it's an illness. They had to call up Montembeault from.
They got one great month out of Bobrovsky at the end of the season,
which usually happens. Yeah, he marches his month. Now Tampa Bay, Kev, the Tampa Bay Lightning that we thought were going to show up at the beginning of the season. Yeah. It took them 40 games, but they've shown up. They lost to New Jersey yesterday. They had broke the 10-game winning streak. But before that, they hadn't lost since before Christmas. Russ saw them in Philadelphia. They won 1-0. They played a playoff-style game. They shut the Flyers down at home, which is difficult. This is the team that we thought we were going to see.
Yeah, I had talked to Cooper in Chicago, several weeks ago. And he told me essentially that it was their record was really kind of an aberration. Like, he thought they were actually a little bit better. And he pointed to some statistics that show that, like, their prime scoring chances in terms of the number they were getting was up and the number they were allowing was down. He thought those were good signs. And he sort of compared it to like a market correction that, last year, they had some Vasilevsky just played out of his mind, and they weren't getting those saves this year that they got last year. But he still thought they were headed in the right direction, and he seemed to indicate that he felt like they were, in his mind, they were playing okay already, and the wins would start to show up. And then right after that, they sort of went into that. So I think coaches know when they see their team on a regular basis and study the film when they're close to that. And we knew Tampa would probably be there at the end, and they'll be, they'll just be in the same situation they've been in for the last few years, where they just got to get over the hump. They got to get a little lucky. They've got to not, work through the psychology of winning in the postseason. So, but that first series, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about what they did last year, and they just have to get through that.
Russ?
Yeah, the one thing in the Flyers game, I saw something in Tampa that I hadn't seen all year or from last year's Tampa. And you're right about the market correction on what Cooper said about the market correction on chances, on great chances, because the Flyers only had 3 or 4 good chances that whole game, maybe only one great one. And they basically got dominated 1-0. I know it's been written well, the Flyers won the first period and whatever. They made the Flyers play defensively to the point because they could just rush the puck up the ice so much that they totally derailed the Flyers offense, completely derailed it. Mm-hmm. And that's something where if they do that to more teams, it's a problem. The other thing that I noticed in that game was Steve Stamkos was still one of the best skaters on the ice, even at his age. And he's more than a point a game, and we kind of forget about him now. And we always talk about Kucherov, and then Point gets talked about, and Stamkos is still an unbelievable hockey player. And I don't want to say he's lost in the shuffle because he's the captain, but, he almost doesn't get appreciated enough. And that team, if they just play defense like that, they're going to win games because the offense is there. There's no question they get chances. And so I don't know why it took this long, and I do think they tuned out Cooper for a little while, but they're at the point where they need to be right now. Now, they lost to the Devils yesterday, but that was inevitable.
The one thing about the Lightning that we should never lose track of is, what makes them such a strong team is their depth. But they have 5 players who can make the difference in any game. They've got Braden Point, Kucherov, Stamkos, Hedman, and Vasilevsky. I mean, those guys can all dominate a game.
Yeah.
And they're capable of that. And, most teams are happy to have 1 or 2.
I did see something I didn't see in the last few years, too. Braden Coburn was sort of playing the Schuster role now, Mike, and he's a lot more mobile than Schuster. He's still a great skater, and he was almost going to fight Travis Konecny until Konecny thought better of it. And I'd never seen Coburn get worked up like that or play as physical as that. And so if he's now changing and sort of that's what his role is, it's a good role for him.
Right, Russ, a Glacier is more mobile than Andre Schuster. 2 quick things here. Just, Kev, I don't know who would be tougher in the playoffs if they make one move. The Islanders, if they get a scorer, or the Carolina Hurricanes, if they get a goaltender. Because I think if neither happens, neither is going to make a deep run in the playoffs. What do you think?
Well, we said that last year with the Hurricanes, and they did it well. I mean, Mrazek has been very good at home.
Yeah.
But do I feel they're top echelon goalies? No, I don't. But they've gotten the job done, this season. But the Islanders, boy, if they could get some scoring, because there's evidence and proof that. If you have a guy who knows how to get people to buy in defensively, doesn't seem to matter who he has in net. Mm-hmm. Didn't we all think they made a mistake when they let Robin Leonard walk?
Yeah.
I guess not. So,
but the loss of Adam Pelech is huge because he was playing top pair for them. So I think their defense is a little bit less than it was, even with the Trotz effect. But they do still need scoring. Like, it's desperate.
Yeah, they do, for sure. Yeah.
Like, I know they scored 5 goals the other day or 4 goals, but that's a rarity for them.
Yeah, even more.
Last thing here, Cameron Young in our chat, and we'll confirm this after the show, but Russ, the Houston Astros got walloped. 1-year suspension for their GM, 1-year suspension for AJ Hinch, losing their first and second round picks this upcoming year and the year after. So they
deserve that.
They paid a big price for cheating.
Good for Rob Manfred. It took a long time, but he did the right thing.
Yeah. All right. Great show, guys. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.